He's Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 WGBH. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. So the Pope's recent visit to the U.S. has churned up in many Catholics a conflict between their deeply rooted religion and their modern-day values. It's a conflict that's particularly familiar to women whose feminist ideals push against their faith, be they Mormon, Jewish, Muslim. How to reconcile women's rights and religious devotion is the subject of a great new book. It's called Faithfully Feminist, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Feminists on Why We Stay. Here with us in Studio 3 is one of the editors, Gina Messina-Dysert. She's an author and dean of the School of Graduate and Professional Studies at Ursuline College. Gina, it's great to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled.
Well, thank you for being here. So before we get to Muslim women and before we get to Jewish women, we're going to start with you because it's Pope Week here, Gina. Because you are a Catholic woman, and I spoke to you before about this, but the difficulty of being a feminist and a Catholic. So what are you doing still in the Catholic Church, Gina?
Why do you stay, as the book
Why
asks?
do I stay? Well, that's a great question. So I'm sure a lot of people who are Catholic will understand being Catholic comes with a lot of culture. I'm a first-generation American. My family is from Sicily. My father was born in Sicily and came to the United States. And so a lot of that culture is just so embedded in my family, and it feels so difficult to walk away from that, number one. But number two, I feel so closely connected to the teachings of Catholic social teaching, to the social justice teachings of the tradition. And for me, that's where I really find my connection to the faith, is through the ideas of social justice, working for positive social change, and also being very rooted in the culture within my family.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that exactly what you'd say? Almost those words, other than the immigrant part of it, isn't that exactly what you'd say?
But you write about, and I don't have to deal with this because I'm in a Jesuit parish, you write about getting the cold shoulder from the pastor as you walk out of Mass.
I do.
Is
I get
really
the cold
true?
shoulder.
Yeah,
no, that
explain
really
that.
is true. That
Tell
really
us
is
what
true.
happened.
So I belong to the same conservative parish I belonged to when I was a child. Coming back to Cleveland from Los Angeles, I relocated close to my family, and that's where my family goes to church, so I continue. And the pastors there actually know me from childhood, and they actually find it very bothersome that I identify as a feminist. And so we've had some difficult exchange, not difficult, I guess awkward exchanges is more appropriate. And yes, one of my pastors who I've known since kindergarten, when I'm leaving Mass, he shakes hands with everybody, says, "God bless you." And when he sees me, he usually says, "Hello." It's interesting. And people ask me, why do you still go to that same church? And yes, family is a very big, important piece of it for me. But also, if you are in a place where everybody thinks like you're not going to be really making big changes, right? So I think it's a piece of my own mission in trying to make change from within.
Marjorie has read your book every page probably 10 times. I have not. I cannot tell a lie. And Faithfully Feminist, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Feminists on Why We Stay. Is there a common thread through all these women, through all these religions? Did they tell stories like you, Gina?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the common thread here is this feminist identity. I want to be cautious and say, we all have wonderful differences that we celebrate in, and we want to really honor each other's differences. But, having a feminist identity, we're coming to our traditions from a very, very similar place, and we have common struggles. And that was the point of the book, is to really identify that struggle, how each of us are encountering it, how are we working through it, and how can we be a support to each other. So often we feel alone, when you feel like you're the outsider. But here we're offering opportunity for people to see themselves in these stories.
Well, when I spoke to you about your book a little while ago.
Your piece was fabulous, by the way, on cruxnow.com.
No,
really
much, Jim.
was.
Jim
was
is
a
my
great
biggest
piece.
cheerleader
No,
here.
it happens to be true.
You know why?
They're not all that good, but that was really, that was really good.
Big feminist over there. Big feminist.
That was a great piece.
Anyway, we talked about the concept of being doubly othered. Which means not comfortable. You get the hairy eyeball from the church, as you mentioned, in some cases, and also from your feminist friends who may think that you're basically that this is a self-loathing kind of knuckling under to the boys who run the church. But you're also an academic, so and you mentioned your family. So in a way, you're kind of quadruply othered, because tell Tell us about trying to get a job as a Catholic feminist theologian.
Right. Well, it's a very difficult situation to be in. First of all, a lot of people feel like feminism is dead. We live in a post-feminist society, which is really an outrageous thought. That's obviously not true. Second of all, people are very interested in what I have to say. I had a record-breaking 15 interviews for academic positions, which is really unheard of. And everyone was very interested in talking with me about my work, but were very fearful about me actually coming to their institution and what that would mean. So I had a very, very difficult time finding an academic position.
Because you are a Catholic feminist theologian.
Exactly, because I'm a Catholic feminist theologian, and because I really work to, I guess, push against the patriarchy, and that can be fearful. For institutions and being concerned about being sanctioned by their bishops and these kinds of things. And so I think people find it interesting, but also want to be cautious and protect themselves.
I don't want to question at all what you said is while you stay. But as I listen to you and as I've listened to Marjorie through the years, I have to believe that there's a piece of you that not only believes what you say, but says this is going to change. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there was, do you have that hope? That I don't mean that all of a sudden mm-hmm. Francis is going to get up today and say, yeah, let's have some women priests, let those guys marry. But is there a piece of you that says, we're going to do more. We're going to hear more than the Pope praising the fact that the head of Catholic Charities for the first time is a woman, how great the nuns are, and all that we want, a greater involvement of women. Is that a piece of why you stay, because you do have hope, or do you?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I have hope. I think, there are opportunities to make change from within and without. I want to honor everybody's work, but I really believe in what Sharon Welch calls a feminist ethic of risk. And the idea that the work we're doing today, we may not see results tomorrow, but it's going to assist in change that's going to happen in our grandchildren's lifetimes and so on and so forth. And so having a mature attitude and recognizing, you're not going to get what you want right away, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And I really believe that my efforts today are going to help my daughter to have a more positive relationship with the church as she becomes an adult.
Do you believe
and so
that?
On.
What?
This
it's going to change?
That it's going to change, and even if it doesn't change
yes.
for you now, it's going to change for your kid or your grandkid when you have one?
I think that people always talk about how the church, moves like the Titanic, and, we're still talking about Galileo, 500 years later and stuff like that. But yes, I do, because I think that that issues like gay marriage are just going to be so normal, they're already normal here in Massachusetts, and they're going to be normal all across the country. The problem for the churches, they're not that normal in places like Africa where the church is big, but I think eventually that will be true. And I think eventually the idea that women are second-class citizens is just going to seem so nutty. It's going to seem as nutty as saying we can't have you, Galileo, saying that the Earth the sun doesn't revolve around the Earth. That it's the other way around. I mean, that's nutty. So I think that's what I think. But I don't think I'm going to see it. I think it's going to be a long time. And you have a great passage. By the way, we're talking with Gina Messina-Dysert. The book is Faithfully Feminist, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Feminists on Why We Stay. You talk about your own kid. How old is your daughter now?
My daughter's 6.
Okay, so she's still pretty little. And you have this great passage in your book, where you write your own essay, and you confess that and these are your words, I confess that I want my daughter to embrace our Catholic identity. I confess that I fear being Catholic will make my daughter feel less than because of her gender. So it's a struggle when your kids are little and they say, why are there no women priests? Mm-hmm. What do you tell her?
Yeah, it is a struggle. And so, I really wanted to confess both my feminist and Catholic sins here in this book, because I feel like I certainly do both. And with my daughter, we have very open conversations, and she's young, she's 6. So some of it is a little confusing for her. She always talked about God as a woman on her own terms. I mean, she came up with that language on her own. Before she really started, paying attention to Mass and these kinds of things. And then when she started at Catholic school, she started coming home and talking about God as a man. And I would say, Sarah, you don't have to talk about God as father or as male. You can talk about God as mother if you want. And she was a little confused by that and went to school the next day and told her teacher, my mom said that Jesus is a woman. So that certainly added to the concerns of our pastors pastor, right? That certainly added to the concerns. But so she's still finding her way, but we really have open conversations. And
but what is the open conversation on the issue that Marjorie mentioned? So you teach your little girl she can be anything she wants to be, and then she says to you what Marjorie asked, so why is there always a man in front of Mass? What do you say?
Well, I tell her that, there are still some issues in the world where people don't see, how things should be evolving and changing, but things are going to change. And there are some places that there are women priests. We have the Roman Catholic Women Priest Movement and the Women's Ordination Conference that are doing fabulous work. So, there aren't any women priests here at our church, but there are in other places. And eventually one day we probably will see a woman priest here.
Okay, so this raises the question of why women, and we're going to get to Jews and Muslims in a second too, after we talk about Kim Davis for a second. But this always raises the question why you just don't go find another church where there are, Episcopalians, where there are women priests and there are gay priests, but you, like a lot of Catholic women, like the other Catholic woman that has an essay in her book, like a lot of us, do the religion shopping thing. What's that about?
Well, so I did do the religion shopping thing, and I talk a little bit about that in my chapter. When I moved to Los Angeles, it was a very interesting time in my life. My mother had just passed away. It was the first time I ever left Ohio. I was in this new land of Los Angeles, totally different. And I thought, I wasn't finding what I needed in the Catholic Church, and maybe I should explore. And I found a fabulous church, All Saints. It's an Episcopalian church in Pasadena. Loved it. We went to church there every week. It was amazing. And we actually decided to join this church. And it was in our second meeting, our class going through the process that I realized, and this is crazy, but I realized I wasn't going to be Catholic anymore. And I literally ran from the building. I thought, oh my God, I can't do this. It sounds so silly, but again, it came back to me thinking, I don't want to be different than my family. I need to be part of these traditions and rituals with my family and find a way back to the Catholic Church. And so I did. Catholic social teaching, like I said, is so important to me, and thinking more about that helped me to find my way back in. And being in Los Angeles, I was just around amazing people. I worked with Rosemary Radford Ruther. She was my dissertation advisor, and I'm very close with her still today. She's wonderful. Who she is. Rosemary Radford Ruther, she's written probably over 50 books about Catholic feminist issues, thousands of essays, and she's really known as the foremother when it comes to Catholic feminist issues. And I was so fortunate to have the opportunity to work with her. So she has certainly been a huge influence in my life.
What'd you call it? Religion shopping? Is that what you call that? You know what I remember, which I had not thought about in years, is we were on the radio on another station, right, when the priest abuse crisis broke in the Catholic Church here. What was the name of that couple from Dover who had a church, who gently lobbed Grace Church in Dover, that wonderful couple? I know you have. You've written about too.
It's a wonderful place.
But they were lobbying you to come on down.
Well, they basically do a Catholic Mass, and the husband's a priest and she's a priest, although they wouldn't be sanctioned, needless to say, by the Vatican. But it is a wonderful Mass, and they do, it's very inclusive and everybody can be involved. They do a great job.
So why is that not a suitable alternative for both? I don't mean that particular church, even though they were great people. Why is that not a suitable alternative to staying for both of you? Something like that. Even though, as you say, the woman priest there, I can't remember her name, and my apologies to her, is not sanctioned, or whatever the appropriate terminology is. Why is that not enough?
Well, I don't know if you want to go first, or he's putting me on the spot here first.
Yeah, I think it's not that it's not enough. I think it's wonderful that people are making movements like this. But for me, I really want to continue to focus on making change within the Catholic Church as an institution, and really working to change the dialogue that happens within the Vatican.
So how do you feel about the Pope's pronouncements on women, speaking about making changes within the Church while he was here for those 6 days?
Well, I appreciate that Pope Francis is talking about women, but I think there's a real disconnect for him on, the interconnection of poverty and women's issues. When he talks about having a new theology of women, he hasn't really expanded on that. I personally do not like being referred to as a strawberry on the cake.
Oh, I know.
Right?
I can't believe he said that.
Very well-intentioned, I am sure, but maybe not well thought out. I am a big Pope Francis fan. I think he's wonderful. I think he's changing changing the way a lot of people feel about the Catholic Church, and a lot of people see him as having very liberal social policies, which is wonderful. But, there's nothing wrong with reminding Pope Francis of his blind spots. And I feel like women's issues is really a blind spot for him. And so I think that's critical.
He always talks about women are mostly their mothers. And if you're not a mother, you kind of don't matter. He always talks about Mary all the time, Mary all the time. That's like all you can do is be a mother. And you talked about how when you went for your pre-Cana, which is the classes you have to take before you become can get married in the church, what did the priest say to you at the pre-Cana conference?
Right. So at the time I was working in a domestic violence shelter. I was a woman's advocate working with victims of domestic violence. And I felt like I was doing really great work. And he kind of patted me on the head like, oh, isn't that nice that you're doing that? Now that you're getting married, it's time for you to leave your job, be a wife and a mother, get pregnant, raise Catholic children. And I have to admit, I was still fully coming into my feminist identity and ideology, but I knew that it wasn't right. And I was really like, oh my goodness, like, is he really saying what I'm doing is not important?
So how do you deal with that?
Well, I didn't deal with that. I think I was very young and still much of, the idea that you don't talk back to a priest and those kinds of things. But, I talk a lot about the fact that, I had a long struggle with infertility. Our daughter is adopted. And in my open letter to Pope Francis that I wrote on the Huffington Post, I talked about, the fact that I had this struggle. And what does that mean for me as a woman if I am not a mother? Do I not have value? What if I have chosen just to have a career, not to be married? What does this mean for single parents? What does this mean for the LGBTQ community and child raising?
What kind of comments did you get on the letter?
I got some very positive feedback, and then I got, some very negative, like, you really must be crazy, and how disrespectful of you, and what an ego you must have.
Exactly.
Right? Those kinds of comments certainly came out.
They don't make it easy, Gina. That's for sure. So I want to ask you about Kim Davis. People may know there's been some developments on the Kim Davis story. She's the clerk that wouldn't give the licenses to gay couples, and she's become a culture war heroine. And the Vatican now kind of pressed against the wall, said that the Pope didn't really understand the full implications of what the details of her supposed conscientious objecting, which in many ways was not even conscientious.
This is after they said they were going to say no more, and it is really rare, from what I read, that they ever, when they say we're done, aren't done. So they obviously realize what effect this was having in this country.
I wrote a piece on this for Crux based a lot on the reporting of Charlie Pierce from Esquire magazine. He's a local guy who was talking about that what happened here, he thinks, is that this cardinal, this archbishop, very conservative archbishop, very anti-gay marriage, unbeknownst to the Pope, kind of included Kim Davis and a whole bunch of people that came in to visit him because he knew that this would have great publicity value for the anti-gay marriage movement. So that's kind of the update. But
you were right yesterday, that your thesis yesterday, which I was making fun of, that the Pope was duped, Charlie is suggesting that he was? Well,
not only is Charlie suggesting it, but the Vatican spokesperson that John Allen quotes in Crux.com, the website I write for, says that it was clear that the Vatican spokesperson said that the Vatican had nothing to do with Kim Davis being in with the Pope. It was this nuncio, or whatever they call it, in the United States.
Even though Davis and her lawyers said that it was a direct invitation from the Vatican officials.
The Vatican is directly contradicting them. And by the way, this particular archbishop has a long relationship with Kim Davis's lawyer.
I knew that. Yeah.
So anyway, what'd you make of that? That was kind of upsetting, the Kim Davis thing.
Well, it is very upsetting. And initial reports, I thought like everybody else, like, well, this must have been arranged by the Vatican. I mean, how else would this have happened? And the Pope had to be knowledgeable about this. Having the Vatican now make additional comments is very shocking, and making a clear statement that he's not, supporting Kim Davis's position. But I think what the bigger issue here is not whether or not the Pope was duped, because he may very well have been. But the bigger issue is, who has the power, right? And who created this meeting to continue kind of business as usual with the Vatican and saying that we do not support gay marriage, we do not support women's issues, and these kinds of things. And so that is very, very problematic. I mean, we didn't see the Pope come in and meet with women from the Women's Ordination Conference.
No, we didn't.
Right? Or, to meet with someone from the Human Rights Campaign or these kinds of things. He met with Kim Davis. And so whether or not he was duped, that was arranged. And there are clearly individuals, people at the Vatican who are very, very invested in keeping the church in its status quo position of really, offering teachings that are oppressive to LGBTQ community, to women.
But see, this is where, Gina, where I asked you before about your hope. Does anybody think that, and I don't know if this is implicit when you're saying, the Pope all of a sudden is going to wake up and have an epiphany next week and say, well, actually, same-sex marriage, not such a bad idea. The problem, I think, for us yesterday and a lot of our listeners was not that he's against same-sex marriage, which we knew, and which, to his credit, he soft-pedaled in the speech to Congress. It was clear it was what he was saying when he was talking about the family, but that he met with this woman in secret. We thought instructed her not to say anything, or her lawyer, until he was out of the country. When Terry Moran from ABC asked him the question about a person just like her without actually mentioning her name, he talked about conscientious objection, and most of us don't see conscientious objection label fitting to someone in the Kim Davis mode. So you don't, even if he had those meetings, you don't expect him to change his position on the issue, do you, or do you?
What I think, or what I would like to believe, first of all, as a cradle Catholic, Pope Francis, this is the first time I've had real hope, as a Catholic, and seeing him be in position, right?
Me too.
I mean, he's really giving us a lot of hope in that, at least the way he is approaching things, he's calling for dialogue, he's calling for reconciliation, he wants to create unity among the people, which those are the things I really appreciate. And I feel like that is helping pave the way for change later. Now, no, I don't think he's going to wake up and change his mind tomorrow, but the language that he has been using has been very, very hopeful, and that is something I have felt very, very positive about. But, Pope Francis has called for this year of mercy, which I think is really interesting. So again, I just refer back to my open letter to Pope Francis. In this year of mercy, what I want to know is this going to be a time when the Vatican confesses its sins against women, against the LGBTQ community, right? Is this going to be the time that happens? So that's what I'm waiting to hear.
We only have a minute or two left. Margie said we're going to talk about Jews and Muslim women. I just wanted, the one thing that sticks with me in terms of the discrimination, I am Jewish, I'm sort of a lapsed Jew, I guess you'd say. I will never forget when, I hope I get this right and you'll correct me, when Joe Lieberman was running for vice president.
Right.
And because of the Sabbath, they're Orthodox Jews, he and his wife, they walk, you can't take, motorized vehicles. They walk to synagogue on a Saturday. And the story of the day, which I still can't get out of, and by the way, I know was a conservative Jew, not the Orthodox, but I knew of this. He goes and sits downstairs with the men, and the woman who was about, we thought, to be the wife of the vice president of the United States has to go to the upper deck with all the second-class citizens. And I don't know what Jewish women are saying.
Yeah, they talk about this in
particular
the book.
thing.
There are Orthodox Jews and there are Muslim women who talk about the sexism and
physical
and the
segregation. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So what do they say about that?
Well, I mean, clearly this is a big issue, right? Jennifer Zobair, who is my co-editor, she has a brilliant essay in the book. I absolutely love her essay. She was Catholic, converted to Islam, and she talks about very much struggling with this idea of separation of men and women in the mosque, and she refers to herself as being unmosqued, right? That she is a Muslim who is practicing but chooses not to go to mosque because she doesn't want to participate in that. So I think that each of us find ways to be strategic, in our faiths, to celebrate our faiths and our feminist identities, and to work for change in different ways.
Okay, I wanted to hear two things from you, Gina, before you go. Tell us about your website and tell us about your event.
Yes. So the website, are you referring to?
Feminism and Religion.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
It's a great website, Feminism and Religion. Right?
Feminismandreligion.com. It's a wonderful blogging site I co-founded with three of my colleagues.
If you say so yourself, yes, exactly.
And so we have readers in 181 countries now. We founded
That's great.
Founded in 2011. It's grown. We have contributions from hundreds of women and men talking about their struggles with feminism and religion, to, discussing different types of faith. It's a great resource. Lots of people utilize it in their classrooms and colleges. And we love the fact that we have great dialogue there. And I just want to say, yes, tomorrow night, October 3rd at 7 p.m. at the Harvard Co-op, we're going to be hosting a discussion, a dialogue, and a book signing at the Harvard Co-op around Faithfully Feminist.
When you go there tomorrow night, don't call it the Co-op, call it the Coop. That's what they're going to know you're an out-of-towner.
No. Gina's from Ohio.
I'm from Ohio. I'm sorry. The Coop. I will not get it wrong again.
That's right.
It's a great place.
Chicken Coop.
Gina, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Gina Messina-Dysert is the author and the dean of the School of Graduate and Professional Studies at Ursuline College. Her latest book is Ursuline. Did I say it wrong?
Yes,
Ursuline. Okay. Her latest book is Faithfully Feminist, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Feminists on Why We Stay. And for those of you women out there struggling, you got to read it. Give you a lot of solace. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, Callie Crossley joins us to talk about the stories that went under the radar this week. She is next on 89.7 WGBH Boston Public Radio.